In this video, I want to show you why people are playing the King's Indian defense on the example of a beautiful masterpiece from the current world chess champion Magnus Carlsen. I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy it and find it instructive, so let's get started. Hi guys, welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, and today I want to show you this amazing game between Arjun Erigaisi and Magnus Carlsen. I guess if you like to play the King's Indian defense, or if you want to try it, maybe it's like the only game you need to watch to get inspired, because the way Magnus Carlsen played this one, I mean, it was absolutely amazing for me, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna be incredibly instructive for you. So yeah, let's just take a look how it all happened. So, well, it was the last round of the Tata Steel Masters 2023, and Magnus Carlsen, well, had a very rough tournament. In the first half of the tournament, he lost 2 games in a row, which hasn't been happening since 2007. So he really wanted to finish this tournament on a good way, and so he wanted to get some play as black. And he tried to get away from the theory, just get some position where he can, outplay his opponent based on his high skill. So let's see, he started with his double fianchetto. It's not really a King's Indian defense strictly speaking, but well, the structure, the pawn structure which they got in the end of the day is typically for King's Indian defense. So yeah, let's see. So here white played d5, trying to occupy as much space as possible from the very beginning, and Magnus tried to play using the dark squares. So basically this bishop on b7 is a sacrifice for the time being, because it's incredibly stupid here, doing absolutely nothing. But Magnus says, I don't care about this bishop, I'm gonna just try to use my dark squares and yeah, just outplay my opponent using that. So the knight is going to c5, that's the first thing here, using these dark squares. The problem with the move b4, which seems to be appealing for white, just winning some space, going forward with the tempo, is that, well, there is this beautiful diagonal, long diagonal for the black's bishop, and of course Magnus would use it, and that is why I guess like b4 is a normal move, it's playable, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be that great as you give black so many interesting options. Knight went to d4, now the bishop is working and the knight is very powerful here. But notice that normally in the Queen's Indian defense, black plays d6, and well, that would create some weaknesses in the white squares. But with this pawn still on d7, it's more stable for black. But Magnus plays e5, immediately attacking this knight and pushing it somewhere back, or, well, provoking white to take, but without the central pawn it would be much simpler for black to handle the whole situation. So white played knight c2, now a5, making sure that this b4 move is not possible, or at least it's not dangerous for black, because once the pawn on e5, this diagonal is blocked, and if you make a passive move, let's say d6 here, then b4 is very annoying and your knight has to go back. So of course, once your knight is on on c5, it's very good, very useful to play a5 to make sure that this knight is very stable. Just remember this pattern. b3, d6. Yeah, so now there is no danger in playing d6 anymore, since nobody can go to the c6 square, so Magnus is stabilizing everything in the center. And a typical approach afterwards is, of course, to prepare the move f5 for black. Since the center is closed, black could attack on the king side, because, well, all of the pieces are here, the knight is supporting from the center. Like I said, this bishop on b7 is doing completely nothing. That's the sacrifice black needs to make in order to make this whole thing happening. But if you look at the white's bishop, it's not really better, so it's not a big deal. And of course, white is trying to create some attack on the queen side in the meantime, but, well, it's not that dangerous as both of the kings are on the king side. So let's see. Magnus is trying to activate this bishop to make it useful. Knight went to a3, and now knight e8, preparing this classical thing, this move f5, and then, well, black is just trying to go forward with all of the pawns on the king side and create some dangerous threats for white. And white, in the meantime, like I said, is trying to attack on the queen side. So I really enjoyed watching this game because this is such a typical battle in the King's Indian defense, where it's the question who is going to be the first one, black on the king side or white on the queen side. Let's see how it happened. So black played f4, trying to close the position completely, and then there are still, like, you always need to maintain a chance to open up the position at some point. If you close everything, then it would be very difficult for you to break through. So this opportunity to break through is very important, but here it's too early to try to open up the position because white is very, very solid, and well, it's gonna be difficult for you to break through afterwards. So f4 first, and then g5, this pawn is going to g4, b4, white is trying to create their own threats, of course, knight went to b7, and what's very important, Magnus didn't exchange those pawns, and it seems like, why wouldn't you exchange? The a file is open for this rook, but the problem is, this a file is actually very useful for white, and after the exchange, the bishop will go to b2, then the rook will go to a1, the rooks are going off the board, and eventually white will get the control of this file and would penetrate into black's camp, and that would lead to problems. That's why Magnus plays knight b7, just stabilizing everything. If you take on a5, no problem, there will be a beautiful square for this knight on c5 once again, and well, we can safely recapture the pawn with the rook, and there are no weaknesses in the black's camp. The only weak pawn here, unprotected pawn, is c7, which is basically making sure guards everything here, and well, of course we need to defend it, but otherwise it's very difficult for white to create some significant threats for black. And now white played g4, trying to close everything, but well, there is still this h pawn, h file, and that is what Magnus uses. Now h3, and of course very important is not to close this last file. Like I said, for example, if you play h4 here, you will never be able to attack on the king side anymore. That would be a horrible strategical mistake, and afterwards it's only white who could attack on the queen side, whereas black has no other opportunities. But with this pawn being on h5, the difference is huge, because black is putting a lot of pressure on the g4 square and potentially could prepare some piece sacrifice on this square. Let's see. Now a lot of maneuvering started on the board, and well, this king went all the way to the king side, somehow to the center, because here it's clear that some action is going to happen sooner or later, so the king is escaping from there. And black is trying to relocate some pieces, remaneuver it, so everything is ready for the attack. This rook went to h-file, because once again it's clear that at some point h-file is going to be opened. And of course white can never take on h5, because once again it's going to be a horrible strategical mistake this time for white, because then the h3 would be a target, and this knight will come all the way to g3 and would be a monster there. So white can't take it, and black can't play h4. At some point, black is gonna take on g4, opening up the h-file here for the rook, and also preparing some sacrifices on g4. That is black's plan, while for white it would be great to play c5 one day, but the problem is black is defending this square so many times that it's practically impossible to do that. And apart from c5, I don't see any interesting active idea for white, and objectively the position is completely equal here, but from a practical point of view it's much simpler to play as black, as the plan is clear. So that is why people are playing King's Indian defense, and yeah, I sincerely recommend you checking it out, because they say it's one of those openings when a very low rated player can outplay a grandmaster, because if you understand your plan, you don't care against who you are playing, you're just executing it and giving your opponent a checkmate, basically. So knight went to f6, putting even additional pressure on this g4 pawn. Now it's only the queen who is guarding this c7 pawn, and you remember that's the most important one, because it controls here everything. King went to e1, and now you could see that all of the white pieces are on the back rank except for those knights. Seems like white is preparing for the next game and just making sure that all of the pieces are in the right places. But yeah, actually, like I said, it's very difficult to play as white. The only active idea is c5, you can do that, and otherwise you're just waiting for black to perform some sharp actions here. Queen went to c8, once again putting additional pressure on this g4 pawn. Rook went to b2, knight d8. Now Magnus said, well, this knight is doing nothing on b7 except for guarding the c5, but there are enough defenders for this square, and this bishop can't really participate. It would be great to have white's bishop on f2, as then c5 would be much simpler, and also potentially this bishop would be great in the defense. But on c1, it's completely useless for white. Queen went to d3, knight f7, king d1. So yeah, black is continuing putting more pressure on the king side, whereas white is trying to evacuate the king, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be that convincing. So now it's time for black to exchange these pawns, as the king is here and it's putting a little bit more pressure for white. Also, remember, my idea was to say that white can control the a file and afterwards create some pressure against the black on the queen side, but this time this rook is so far away, the queen is so far away, the king is here, so it would be very, very difficult for white to control this a file. That is why Magnus decided that's the moment now to open it up. And now it takes on g4, and rook went to a1, the second rook is coming to h2, so black is extremely active, and the engine says it's actually better for white, but well, good luck playing such a position as white, where it's not clear which move you are supposed to do, whereas black is just coming all along the way, preparing more and more aggressive stuff for you, and yeah, eventually white just collapses oftentimes in those positions. Now rook to h2, giving a check, activating the rook, rook g2. White is basically trying to exchange as many pieces as possible. That's normally a good strategy when you don't have the initiative and you're defending, just trying to exchange as many stuff as possible so that you don't need to fight against so many threats. But Magnus says, okay, we are going to exchange all of the rooks, and then boom, I'm gonna sacrifice the knight here for those two pawns, and then I'm gonna have two connected passers, and good luck trying to stop it. So that's what happened basically. Bishop takes g4. Once again, the position is completely equal according to the engine objectively, but it's so much simpler to play as white. You just push your pawns, and yeah, white would try to stop it, but it's very, very difficult. Bishop f3, bishop went to h3, preparing the move g4. Now it's constant threat, so bishop went to h5 to avoid this move with the tempo, but it still comes there, now opening up some squares for black pieces as well. Knight went back to e2, bishop f1, now pinning this knight and creating even more additional pressure. Queen went to d1, bishop g2, bishop g6, knight went to g5. Now the pawn on e4 is under attack, because, well, there is no longer a pawn on f3 to protect it. So yeah, white is having a lot of difficulties. The knight is going back, so it's clear now that white's attack on the queen side is over. Bishop f3, queen went to f1, king g7, and now opening this h file potentially for the queen. So the queen is very flexible. It could go this way or this way, and of course right now it's not doing anything, so at some point it's time for Magnus to activate the queen. Now it went to h8, and white decided, well, if I'm gonna stay here passive all day, then one day I'm gonna collapse and black is just gonna penetrate and win the game. So why don't I give this piece back for those two pawns, but make sure that I'm at least a little bit active and try to get some counterattack. But unfortunately it doesn't really feel that way, as black bishop is suddenly very, very strong here, and well, all of black pieces are active, and there is still a passer here. The g4 pawn is very, very strong. Queen went to c1 to defend the knight on c3 and attack the knight on g5, but the knight just went back, and there are so many beautiful squares for this knight to go. First of all, this e5 one, where it's gonna create a lot of threats for white, and it's gonna control everything. Knight back to b5, attacking the c7 pawn. Queen a1, threatening checkmate ideas here, starting with queen a1, and then, well, there are so many threats. If you try knight takes c7, for example, it just checkmate in a few moves, because queen goes to c3, and then you can go to d1. If you go to b1, there is queen b3, and this bishop guards all of the squares along the diagonal, so the king has nowhere to escape. So that is what happened here. Queen a8, e5. White is trying to block this diagonal and maybe exchange the bishops in the event of bishop takes, but of course black didn't want to do it, so Magnus took with the pawn. And now knight went to d6, activating the last piece. It was pretty passive there on f7. Now knight to d6, bishop h6 check, king f7, knight takes d3, pawn takes. So now we have only the bishops and the queens on the board, but well, it's just an extra pawn here, and also white's king is much weaker. Bishop g5. Of course, white wanted to exchange here on g5. If black would take, that would activate the queen. But now if you take on f6 here, as white just either queen takes or king takes, both moves are working, and then the queen is very active, and there is no way to save this position for white. So bishop went to e3, and now e4, opening this whole diagonal for black pieces. Bishop takes b6, given, taking this pawn back, but well, it's too late for that because because black's threats are so strong here. Queen went to e2, now controlling everything. b5, well, if you have 3 more moves, you can promote the pawn, but of course checkmate is coming here, so white resigned in this position. An example variation is here, king to a2, bishop d1, now threatening queen b3, checkmate on the board. Well, you can give a check, but essentially you can't deal with that and you need to give up your queen. That is why white resigned. A beautiful game from Magnus Carlsen. Essentially, all you need to love this opening for black and try it in your games. That is for your inspiration to understand what is the idea of this opening for black, how to attack. I hope you enjoyed it. Write in the comments whether you play this opening, whether you would like to try it, and well, ask any questions if you still have it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, if you felt like it was instructive for you, and hope to see you again in the next videos.